Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, and I'm joined this morning by Andrew Erickson and by Alfredo Brown of Football Guys. Alfredo, thank you for making the time and joining us on this beautiful Tuesday morning, despite the fact that it comes after a tough Monday night, not just in terms of the injuries, but in terms of the scoring. I mean, it was not a particularly fun evening of football, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was rough. At one point, I was sitting there. I had both the games on because I have YouTube TV, not a sponsor. And then I have both games on each side of the TV there. And my wife looks over. She's like, is it really 3-6 and 3-7? Isn't that bad? Aren't these bad games? She doesn't even know anything about football. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it can take a very casual observer. That's all it takes to determine that was not good football being played. So we will jump into what is hopefully a more fun discussion than anything about the game last night. And that is talking about some buy low, sell high wide receivers. But we're actually going to start, that'll be later in the show. We're going to start with the most traded wide receivers. And this is as of the last couple of days here after the end of the week 2 games. The number one most traded wide receiver, guys, is Garrett Wilson. Obviously somebody everybody loved this summer. Now a very different quarterback situation than we had anticipated. We saw it kind of play out that way in week 2 where he did have the big play that kind of saved fantasy scoring if you started him, but obviously not an encouraging game coming up against maybe the best defense in the NFL, of course. So that is a factor as well. But Alfredo, I will start with you. Garrett Wilson, are you buying, selling, or holding as of right now?
I'm selling, and I think a lot of the people that are buying are doing so to, maybe confirm those priors that Garrett Wilson is a really talented player, which he is, don't get me wrong, but we have to be able to adjust. This is now Zach Wilson playing quarterback, so we have to make that adjustment, and I think that what we're seeing here is just something where Garrett Wilson still has a pretty good sell, I don't want to say high, but just the sell medium window. He's got 2 touchdowns on 7 catches in a Zach Wilson-led offense. And both these plays were just incredible plays. The one where he tips it to himself. Another one is just a slant catch and run all the way down the field. He's doing 99% of the work. I can't imagine he's going to continue to hold up 99% of that relationship for the rest of the season. And after all these amazing plays and the touchdowns every week, he's still just wide receiver 22. We're looking at, I think, right now, best case scenario for Garrett on the season. The Jets really don't know their identity right now. Even Breece Hall said that. He's like, we're still figuring things out. So yeah, I'm selling Garrett Wilson while I still can.
Erickson, what do you think? Buy, sell, or hold?
I think you got to sell. It just the wide receiver 1 upside, I think, is totally nuked without Aaron Rodgers, and the fact that I think you can get a receiver, maybe another receiver without a wide receiver 1 upside, but someone that offers a much higher floor, someone that's like every year finishes a fantasy wide receiver 2. I think it's just time to cut your losses with Garrett Wilson. It's like the wide receiver 1 dream is not going to happen this year. Draft a steadier asset that you can plug and play every single week, because I mean, it's just going to be a struggle with Garrett Wilson every single week. And we pulling your hair out. He has to make these amazing plays just to do enough to get there for your lineup, and it's just not going to continue. So yeah, he's someone that I think that you can cut your losses
Alfredo,
with.
I want to get your opinion. This isn't a Dynasty show, but in Dynasty, are you approaching him a little bit differently? Obviously, he's still so young and just so uber talented.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are approaching him a little bit differently in Dynasty, but I also think the people that have him on their roster are also approaching it differently. They're just kind of holding on to him. I think that in Dynasty, everything's going to be in a holding pattern right now, and I wouldn't be selling the farm to go get Garrett Wilson, especially because we don't know how Aaron Rodgers is going to return next year. I know, not that he's not going to, but how he's going to look when he does. At his age, coming off an Achilles, we just don't know. So there's a lot of uncertainty. In Dynasty, I think you hold. In redraft, I think you got to sell as quick as you can.
Let's do a couple of trade comparisons here. Alfredo, sticking with you. Would you trade Garrett Wilson for DJ Moore?
I guess. That's not very convincing, but I guess.
Okay, I'll take it. How about Garrett Wilson for Zay Flowers?
Zay Flowers, yeah. I think that we're just scratching the surface with Zay Flowers and that Lamar Jackson offense. Yes, I think there's a much higher ceiling there with Flowers.
Yeah, did get less usage with Mark Andrews back, but that catch he had on the 50-yard bomb was a thing of absolute beauty. Garrett Wilson for Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett is still very good at football, as proven last week. I think that even with all these other wide receivers out there, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett is still getting his. And the Seattle Seahawks offense is probably somewhere in between their performances in week 1 and week 2, but Tyler Lockett is still going to get the production, and I think he will finish this season well ahead of Garrett Wilson, especially if we start to see that regression on those touchdowns.
Erickson, are you doing a clean sweep as well, trading Garrett Wilson for DJ Moore, Zay Flowers, and Tyler Lockett?
I think so. Yeah, I think that all three of those players, I think, just have clear pictures of what they're going to do. I mean, DJ Moore, I know there are question marks with what's going on with the Bears offense, but DJ Moore has always been a wide receiver too. Like every single year, he's always had bad quarterbacks through Carolina. So when we look up at the end of the year, DJ Moore is going to be inside the top 24. I feel confident about that. Garrett Wilson, on the other hand, I don't feel confident because until they have a new quarterback, because it's really Zach Wilson. It's not just, oh, he has a bad quarterback. No, he has Zach Wilson, like the bad quarterback. So until we get somebody else, because we saw Garrett Wilson be good with non-Zach Wilson quarterbacks as a rookie, but I just need to see who the Jets add or what move they make at quarterback. That's really the only window where you see Wilson prevailing, and even that's just a very, very long stretch where you're really just praying that things kind of work out.
If you guys are anything like me, fall is unquestionably your favorite season. There's nothing I love more than seeing the colors change, feeling that crisp autumn breeze. It just feels like football. I love fall camping, going to games, pretty much any outdoor activity this time of year. And the only thing better is spending fall outside with friends and with beer, but not just any beer. Miller Lite, the 96-calorie beer that tastes like beer and is perfectly brewed for everything summer and fall have to offer. In fact, I just went camping with some friends the other weekend, so we had to pack the travel coolers full of Miller Lites, sitting around the fire that night, swapping stories and inside jokes, all while cracking open another round of Miller Lites. It is heaven, whether you're spending evenings around a backyard fire pit, enjoying a football game with pals, or sharing laughter amidst the rustle of falling leaves. Live those autumn moments with Miller Lite. With a Miller Lite in your hand, fall doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. Or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Guys, probably the most interesting and fun wide receiver to talk about right now is Puka Nacua. Has really taken the league and fantasy football and Twitter and just everything by storm. Is he a buy, sell, or a hold through 2 incredible first weeks of his career, Erickson?
I mean, can you buy him at this point? Like, I don't know. I definitely don't want to sell him. Like that should be clear. I don't want to sell Puka Nacua, and I just don't know, like, if you're going to have enough to bring to the table to get him on your team. Like, I think that's the big issue. And I think if you miss the window, I don't know if I would be willing to overspend. Because for me, with Puka, it looks like he's a player that he has wide receiver 1 upside. So unless if I'm moving a wide receiver 1, like, that's the only reason I would try to get Puka Nacua. But if I can move anything less than that, any receiver that is a player where I don't really see they have a scenario where they can finish as a fantasy wide receiver 1, like, I would move that guy to get Puka. But that may not be enough based on whoever owns him in my specific leagues, because I think that he has top 12 ceiling rest of year, even with Cooper Kupp returning, because I think that we saw 2 receivers be productive in this offense before, and Puka Nacua in this Robert Woods role, like, he can thrive alongside Cooper Kupp, even if he comes back. He also has a hamstring injury, so there's no guarantee that Cooper Kupp, even when he returns, is going to be the same guy, number 1, and is going to be on the team healthy all year long. So that's kind of my take on
But
Nacua.
Isn't it like, just kind of philosophically, if you have a receiver who has 25 catches in the first 2 weeks, he's on pace for over 200 catches this season. Isn't that guy kind of definitionally a sell?
Well, I think that statistically speaking, yes, like, he's not going to be able to continue that. But how many touchdowns does he have?
Yeah.
None. Or I think he only has 1. So, like, he's not scoring. So that's the other thing. Or, yeah, Alfredo's confirming. So 0 touchdowns. So that's not going to sustain. If he's accumulating this amount of yardage and this many receptions and this many targets, like, he's eventually going to find the end zone more, which will make up for, okay, now he's only catching 10 balls a week as opposed to 15. Like, yeah, the statistics are not going to continue, but why is his involvement in the offense going to go away? Like, that's the big selling point here, and it's not. Like, he's played 2 games. And Sean McVay has convinced everyone that this is the guy he wants to get the football to. So unless I'm getting wide receiver 1, like locked and loaded production back for Puka Nacua, I'm not selling him for anything less than that. And if I could buy him for less, that's the approach I would do, would be trying to get a player that I think can finish as a top 12 fantasy wide receiver.
Alfredo, what do you think?
I'm in full agreement with Erickson on this. I don't think you can buy Puka Nacua anywhere. I think that the ask is going to be way too much. And I think if you have him on your team, I don't think you want to sell him, because I think that you've got a guy here that should be, or very well could be, a locked and loaded top 15 wide receiver every week. Even when Cooper Kupp is back, Erickson alluded to it. It's that Robert Woods role. We've seen them do it before. Matthew Stafford looks good. And I think we're also underselling here how much it matters when Sean McVay likes a guy. We're seeing the opposite effect with Cam Akers, and how like he's on the team, he's off the team, snip, snap, snip, snap. Like Puka, Puka is his sweet prince. He wants him out there on the field every week. He wants to get the ball into his hands. He's getting him involved in the rushing game. So I think whatever side you're on here, I think everything is just in a holding pattern with Puka Nacua.
He does have a pretty long injury history in college. Not that we're predicting injuries or anything like that. He was on the injury report going into week 2. That has been a factor in why he fell to the 5th round in the NFL draft. So just to mention it, but yeah, he's just been so good. He's one of those guys that's just like, it's super, super fun to have him on your roster right now. And you don't want to give that up, even if it might make sense. Even if you got a Godfather offer, I want to be able to watch Puka Nacua get 20 targets a game and have that, be able to brag to my league mates that I'm the one who found him late. I think there is an element of that, especially in like a friends or family league. But I do want to ask some one-on-one trades here. Alfredo, would you trade Puka Nacua for Brandon Aiyuk?
Nope, I'd probably keep Puka here. I think that Puka's got a little bit more guaranteed volume each week, whereas with that Niners offense, you just don't know which way it's going to go.
How about for Mike Evans?
Professional tease. We might be talking about Mike Evans a little bit later. So no, I would not trade Puka Nacua for 3 Mike Evanses. No.
Yeah, sneaking it in there. And then how about for the guy we just talked about, Garrett Wilson?
No, but if you can do that the opposite way around, and you could somehow trade Garrett Wilson for Puka Nacua, you're just a Jedi. Like, you're not even a person in a fantasy football league. You have just tricked everyone.
So Erickson, same 3 guys: Aiyuk, Evans, Garrett Wilson. Again, is it another clean sweep here?
It's a clean sweep for me. I think we got to up the ante, honestly. Okay. I mean, I talked about Puka being in the wide receiver 1 tier. Like, I'm looking at him closer to players like Jaylen Waddle, Calvin Ridley. What about those guys? Like, that's where I think you're really realistically.
So let me just ask you this then.
Of his actual
I was going to say, who is the lowest ranked guy you would trade Puka Nacua for? Just running through what we have currently here, rest of season rankings: Jefferson, Tyreek, Chase, Diggs, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, Calvin Ridley, Jaylen Waddle, Devontae Smith. I mean, at what point in those rankings are you saying, okay, anybody there and above, I'm trading him for?
I think
Keenan Allen, T. Higgins.
Guys like Keenan Allen, I would probably move, because Keenan Allen, I have age concerns with him, like longevity concerns with him. So I actually have them ranked back to back, Puka and Keenan Allen. I would take Puka over Metcalf, Cooper. I'd take him over T. Higgins. Devonta Smith's probably right on that line, just because he's not the wide receiver 1 on his team, but the Eagles defense is also like horrible. So I think that he's still going to be able to eat in that offense. But yeah, I have him wide receiver 12, and I don't think that it's crazy to think that you could trade Puka to get Chris Olave. I don't know if that's going to fly. I don't know if that Olave manager probably wouldn't do it, but I think that what their value is and what they're going to do the rest of the season, I don't think it's going to be that dissimilar, to be totally honest. Like, I don't think it's that far of a stretch. Obviously, Puka comes with more risk, I think, just because he's more unknown, but I think that's kind of what we're going to see from him, though.
Completely nuts. Alfredo, what about you? Who's the worst wide receiver that you would trade Puka for?
The worst wide receiver I would trade him for is, what's funny is the kind of like that line of demarcation we have there. I actually like Keenan Allen for the rest of the year here. I liked him coming into the season. I think he's been producing pretty well, and I think he's got just ever so slightly a bit more upside in that offense as Justin Herbert's number 1 target, whereas Puka may get relegated to number 2 target. That doesn't mean he'll be bad. I think I would rather have Keenan Allen rest of the season than Puka Nacua. And it's weird to say that might be a hot take going into week 3.
Yeah, it really is nuts. And to be clear, when I say that, I wasn't saying that Erickson is nuts for his take or you, Alfredo. It's nuts what Puka is doing. I really am just like blown away. It's just super, super fun to watch. Since we're talking all sorts of trades today, I want to remind everyone to check out Trade Central. Our tool can quickly pinpoint your team's strengths, weaknesses, and top trade partners all in one place. Leverage the trade finder to identify game-changing trades and outsmart your competitors. And then before shaking hands on the deal, use the trade analyzer to gauge the true impact of your moves. Let My Playbook's advanced tools be your one-stop shop to dominating the season. Just go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Guys, let's get into the buy low, sell high segment. We are starting, as always, with buy low, talking about the wide receivers here. Alfredo, who is your first buy low wide receiver?
So my buy low wide receiver, it's funny because we just mentioned his name, but Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle has had, I think, 2 kind of like awkward weeks here with the Miami Dolphins, where week 1 is the big Tyreek Hill blow up where any production that Waddle would have had is going to be overshadowed. And this like ugly New England Patriots game where it's kind of always played like that. The game gets slowed down a little bit more. There's a bit more running. It's a bit more of that old school smash mouth football. And I think that right now you can go and buy Jaylen Waddle because of this concussion protocol news that's out there and the discount that's probably going to be there. He was pretty average these first 2 games, but we know that's not who he is. That's not who he's been in the NFL. He was wide receiver 13 as a rookie, wide receiver 8 last season. Currently, he's the wide receiver 37. If there was a guy that I'm banking on being way better than where he's at right now, it's Jaylen Waddle. And we still see it. All the athletic ability is there. And the way that he's using that offense, he's set up to always be able to run after the catch. And right now, second in the NFL in yards after catch per reception. I think that Jaylen Waddle he should course correct here. And then there's going to be a really good stretch of games for the Miami Dolphins versus wide receivers in fantasy football, weeks 11 through 15. And those are going to be some of the most pivotal weeks of the season. If you have Jaylen Waddle on your team, it's going to be a really soft schedule at that point.
I think it's important to mention too that like wide receiver just in general as a position is inherently volatile week to week. Even guys that are consistent year over year have weeks where they're down, and sometimes it happens back to back. That's happened to a degree with Waddle, obviously the injury stuff here. So I'm fully with you. I think he's kind of a no brainer.
Well, I mean, Waddle's still he's still over 80 yards in both of his games.
Yeah.
So even though he's like
huge
not
quotes, yes.
having big games, it's like, oh, well, he only had 80 yards again.
Yes, and that's it. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Did you say, Alfredo, I'm sorry if you did, where would you have him ranked rest of the season at wide receiver?
I didn't say, but I still think, Jaylen Waddle for a lot of us, he was like a top 10 wide receiver going into the season. I still think that he's somewhere in that top 12 to 15 range. There's not too many guys that I would still keep over him, especially with everything that's happened with Garrett Wilson and, what we've seen with Devontae Adams even and the Raiders. Like there's just a lot of wide receivers that are in flux. So to me, Jaylen Waddle is still a top 15 wide receiver.
Erickson, who's your buy low wideout?
Oh, this one, I like this one a lot, so kudos to me. Christian Watson has not played yet in 2023. He's missed the first 2 weeks with a hamstring injury. But remember, the biggest concern with Watson was never the talent, right? He had a great rookie year when he was healthy, super high in target rate per route run, super efficient yards per route run, touchdown machine. The question was, okay, how good is Jordan Love? Well, guys, 2 weeks in, Jordan Love has 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, I know one of those games was against the Bears, but he did play also well against the Atlanta Falcons. And he's playing with way less weaponry than we thought he would ever have. Like, Watson hasn't played. Aaron Jones missed last week. Has Jordan Love missed a step? No. He's been super productive, super efficient, playing with subpar talent around him. So what's going to happen when they drop their best wide receiver on the field with Jordan Love? All these touchdowns that are going to guys like Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Ontario Wicks, who are they going to go to now? They're going to go to Christian Watson. So I think that Watson is just a great buy low because the concerns about Jordan Love have been mitigated. He's looked really good through the first 2 weeks of the season. So I'm more confident now in Christian Watson that he is going to deliver and be that number 1 receiver for the Packers, especially because Jordan Love has kind of spread the ball out for the most part with these receivers that have been healthy. So Watson has a chance to step in, become that alpha, and you can get him at a discount. And I'm not really concerned about him like getting re-injured or being slow off the injury because we saw it last year. He missed a lot of time last year with an injury, came back, was immediately productive. So I would bet on that happening again with Christian Watson. And you can get him at a discount because we haven't seen him. People have kind of forgotten about him. And he's like, oh, yeah, Christian Watson. Remember, I was high on this guy. Like, he's just been on my IR spot the last 2 weeks. Like, I got him in a bunch of spots, and I'm like so ready to put him in my starting line. I'm like, I need this juice, baby. Let's get Christian Watson in the lineup. So I think that you can acquire him, and I think he has a ton of upside that I think some fantasy managers may not be recognizing just based on how well Jordan Love has played.
Where do you see, now that we've seen them for a couple of weeks, where do you see this Packers offense kind of finishing across the NFL, over the rest of the season, Erickson?
I mean, they're probably going to finish better than they did last year. Like, Jordan Love is playing much better than Aaron Rodgers played last year. He's way more aggressive downfield. Like, they're not afraid to dial up pass attempts for him hitting some of these younger players. And that's the bet when you make your roster really young, right? The range of outcomes is very wide because you're not sure how these young players are going to develop, but we're seeing with the Rams, right? One of the league's youngest rosters, super fun. And I think the Packers are kind of mimicking that a little bit with how young their rosters. They didn't bring in a bunch of veterans to like, oh, they know the playbook, they know the systems. Like, no, like let the kids go out and play and see what happens. And so far, it's been really positive. So I think they're going to be an above average offense, maybe sneaking to the top 10. Not a juggernaut in any case, but they run faster. They're not a slow-paced offense with Aaron Rodgers gone. So I like the Packers a lot. And, I mean, just the way that division is kind of shaping up, I mean, they got a really good shot at dethroning the Lions, who were the favorites to win the NFC North if they continue to play well.
Let's go to the sell-high wide receivers. Alfredo, we'll start with you.
This one I would have thought is obvious because of how low everyone had him ranked versus how well he's playing here for the first couple weeks. It's Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Evans. The Bucs started out with Minnesota and Chicago to start the season. Really easy schedule, and I just want to make sure that fantasy managers are not overlooking that. There needs to be context added to production. He's had back-to-back touchdowns in consecutive weeks, a monster 70-yard catch, and this is not an indictment on Mike Evans as a player. I get it. He's a little bit older, and you start to see these players fall off the age cliff. He's incredibly talented. I don't want to take away anything from him. My worry here is a bit more about what happens to this offense when he starts to go up against better defenses. What happens to Baker Mayfield specifically when they go up against better defenses? Also, it's just really hard to continue to lean in and depend on touchdown production every single week from a wide receiver in this offense. So right now, Mike Evans, he's the wide receiver 4 in PPR. Once again, if I think that's the highest he is going to be in fantasy at this season at any point, if you believe that he is going to be lower than wide receiver 4 going forward, you should be trying to trade him right now. It should be that simple. You might have some managers in your league that are like, yes, I remember Mike Evans. That guy's really good. Cool, he's back. I was just worried that maybe Brady wasn't there. And that's how you play this. But yeah, I don't want to say that I don't have a lot of faith in Mike Evans going forward or the Bucs going forward. I just don't think he's going to be as good as wide receiver 4 going forward.
I don't have him as a sell high because I don't roster him anywhere. I don't have him on any teams where I can even go out and sell him. So I'm fully with you here. Erickson, what's your stance on Evans here quickly?
Yeah, I think that he's a boomer bust wide receiver that you want to sell after he booms, especially when it's in back-to-back weeks against bad matchups. And he's got the Eagles this week, strong perimeter cornerbacks that really their weakness is the middle of the field. So expect way more of Chris Godwin, way more of the tight ends for the Buccaneers, and not another bomb touchdown catch for Mike Evans that's going to really buoy his fantasy production. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, I always thought Mike Evans was going to be his ADP. But, when you draft him as wide receiver 36 and he finishes as wide receiver 27, like, what were you really winning in that scenario? That's kind of always how I viewed Evans during draft season. I knew that he wasn't going to be the wide receiver 36, but I knew that he probably wasn't going to finish high enough versus the other receivers in his draft range where I wanted to bet more on the upside long term. And I think we're just seeing the peak of his powers here early on.
Erickson, who's your sell high wide receiver?
For me, it's going to be Skyy Moore for the Kansas City Chiefs. He caught a touchdown last week after basically being not used at all in week 1 on Thursday night. So I think we may see some managers being like, all right, finally, it's Skyy Moore season. Like, it's finally happened for him. It's like, guys, like the Chiefs, The way they're rotating all their wide receivers is the worst thing possible for fantasy football. Like, none of these guys can be relied on a week-to-week basis. Like, especially now with Travis Kelce back in the fold, you got to sell high on Skyy Moore. Again, I mentioned that he scored the touchdown. He had a 54-yard catch, which came on one of the last plays of the game. Like, before that, he basically had no yardage and was just all on the touchdown, which, yes, Chiefs receivers are going to score touchdowns this year. Are you going to know the weeks that they're going to score? No idea. And because they use so many of them, because they rotate so many guys, it's just going to be super frustrating. So for me, Skyy Moore was someone I liked a lot during draft season, and I'm changing my tune a little bit because through 2 weeks, he's not getting targets. Like, I was expecting him to step up and be a target earner in this offense. That has not been the case. And that was not the case for him as a rookie. So why is he suddenly just going to start getting targets? I don't think it's going to happen. So for me, Skyy Moore is someone that I'm trying to either package with another player to move up at a receiver or running back position, because I don't think that he has enough name cachet on his own to just sell high straight up. But I think that there are much better bets. And I think Skyy Moore, I think it's good process to sell these Chiefs receivers after they have a big game. When you're looking at the usage, it's really not great. It doesn't really bode well for Skyy Moore for the rest of the season.
Let's wrap up with some quick listener questions here. These are coming from Twitter. From Steve, should he trade away Garrett Wilson for DeAndre Swift? What do you think, Alfredo?
Woof. Okay, these are both these are both sells for us. I think this is gonna have to depend, and normally I don't like to do this, but this is gonna have to depend on your roster build and your roster makeup, like what position you actually need. Normally I just say draft and trade for value, and worry about positional needs later. But I assume if you're going out and looking to get DeAndre Swift, you need running back help. But I might try to go for someone a little bit more reliable, someone that might have a little bit more of a long-term effect. I think you might be able to trade Garrett Wilson plus for a Joe Mixon and get yourself a nice running back there. Erickson, you look like you have
Alfredo,
something.
what you do is you trade Garrett Wilson for DeAndre Swift, and then you trade DeAndre Swift for Joe Mixon.
There it is.
And so
Analytics.
You just follow
Analytics. I like it.
Next question from Jason. Trade my Gabe Davis for their Christian Kirk in half PPR, or he also has the option to drop Gabe Davis for Nico Collins. Alfredo?
Is it weird that I like Nico Collins the best out of these guys and you don't have to trade for anyone? Like Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk just feels like it's the same dude. Like they're just wearing different shirts. Like that's all. I kind of like Nico Collins because I think he's got some of the best upside here in this group. He's definitely overperforming a little bit, but I still think there's some of the best upside there. So I think I might drop Gabe Davis for Nico Collins and just avoid the trade altogether.
And Nico also just should not be on the waiver wire. He's been too good, and I think the upside is there. I love CJ Stroud a lot. Erickson, what do you think on that one? Would you also, out of Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Nico Collins, would Nico be the guy you prefer?
I think so. I just think that I like his steady role on the offense. Wide receivers that see consistent targets is hard to come by. Like, it's really the top tier guys, and that's really it. Whereas every other receiver just kind of falls in that boom or bust category. We saw it with Kirk week 1 versus week 2. Gabe Davis week 1 versus week 2. Like, boom or bust. Like, that's what you're going to get from a lot of these guys. Where Nico Collins, 2 straight weeks with CJ Stroud, what has it been? Consistent targets, consistent production. Nico Collins is 5th in receiving yards. Like he's balling out with CJ Stroud. So yeah, I think that I want Nico Collins here as well. I agree with Alfredo.
Last one here. We'll go very quickly because I think it's an easy one. Drop Jahan Dotson or Zay Flowers for Jaden Reed or Reynolds. And I'm not sure if that's Josh Reynolds or Craig. I think the answer is still no for either of them. What do you think, Alfredo?
No. Keep those wide receivers. Don't go and pick up these guys.
Yeah, Erickson, do you agree?
Yeah, no, I'm keeping both those wide receivers. First round picks, not giving them up for some stopgap receivers.
That one was from Sal. We definitely strongly agree with not dropping those guys. Just quick recap here. The buy low wide receivers were Jaylen Waddle and Christian Watson, and our sell highs were Mike Evans and Skyy Moore. Thank you so much for joining us here, Alfredo. Hopefully we have a fun rest of the season. For Alfredo and for Erickson, I am Ryan Wormeli. We will see you guys again next time.